Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the organizing team of the conference, the conference organizing team, I would like to welcome you to the sixth IDSC Institute for Data Center Computing Big Data Conference. We were hoping, we meaning the organizing team, were hoping to be able to have this conference back to face-to-face one, so that we will have exciting face-to-face interaction during the conference or the post-conference. But unfortunately, as you know, COVID prevented us from doing so. We will continue the series of this conference, and the next year we are truly hoping to be able to go back to face-to-face. So this is a sixth instance of Big Data Conference at the University of Miami, IDSC. And so this year, as I said earlier, the COVID that prevented us from doing all kinds of things. So that this year the focus is this: how the business and data analytics, the data science have been drastically affected by the existence of COVID. And so what the future of the big data will be during COVID and the post-COVID world. So that is the theme that we organized, with which we organized this conference. Oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Mitsuo Ogihara. I'm a professor of computer science, also the director of educational workforce development in the Institute of Data Science Computing. So this will be a 3-hour conference, and there will be keynote speeches, as well as a panel discussion. Hope you will enjoy attending the conference. Now, let's get to the meat of the conference. I will like to start by introducing the first keynote speaker, Dr. Michael Mylrea. Dr. Michael Mylrea is Distinguished Fellow for Industrial Cybersecurity at the University of Miami Institute of Data Science and Computing, and a Senior Distinguished Engineer at the Resilience, which is one of the fastest growing technology companies in the USA, and the company is focused on disrupting medicine with innovation. At the Resilience, Dr. Michael Mylrea is leading security architecture and the design efforts with various disruptive solutions, from digital twin to privacy-preserving zero trust platform. Now, Dr. Michael Mylrea has a lot of kudos, and he is a recipient of numerous awards. Has served on many advisory boards, including NSA, DoD, and you name all, you can name all the 3-letter government organizations that Michael Mylrea has served as say advisor. Also, he has given numerous keynote speeches at leading conferences in security. So I'm very happy to have Dr. Mylrea today to give you a keynote speech. And now, without further ado, here is Dr. Michael Mylrea.
All right, let's jump into it. Thank you very much again for the kind introduction, Mitsu, and special thanks to University of Miami's Data Science Institute School of Business for putting this together. Today, I'm going to speak specifically to Industry 4.0, but dive deeper into the digital transformation underway. We've seen that this transformation has exponentially increased the volume, the velocity, and the variety of data we consume. These changes underway have also fundamentally altered our relationship with data, our economies, our national security, our health, our livelihoods. And never have we seen that be more than what we've seen in the last 2 years. During the pandemic, that has expedited our digital transformation in ways that we may have never anticipated. It's sped up the volume, the velocity, the variety of data. So today I'm going to speak specifically to a number of the technologies that are driving that change, that underpin that digital transformation. And I'm going to speak to both the prospect of these technologies as well as the peril as we live in a digital age where our data and our data, it's a data-driven age where our life and death, poverty and prosperity are increasingly determined by our availability of data, our ability to understand it, to control it, to protect it. And so as we go through our presentations today at the Big Data Conference, a couple of questions that I would like you to consider and keep front of mind here. So how has this transformation underway, this digital data transformation, fundamentally altered our relationship with data, how we consume it, how we manage it, how it's changing our relationships? What are the tech drivers and the related opportunities and challenges? And then what does this mean for our current and future economy, our security, our livelihoods? Well, I'm going to focus on manufacturing, looking at some of the disruptive approaches to digital twins, distributed ledgers of things, or blockchain. A lot of these technologies and methods are horizontal and can be applied to other spaces. So as I noted, the pandemic transformed our lives. It transformed our relationship for data. We saw that it was a reminder, it reaffirmed that all modern organizations are not only cyber organizations or digital or data-driven organizations, but they're also health organizations, in the sense that there's not a single modern organization that can function without a healthy ecosystem in our society to sustain our armies, our economies, our manufacturing plants. And so the pandemic really transformed our use, our consumption of data, the 3 V's that I discussed around volume and velocity and variety of data. And we see that that's expedited this industrial revolution underway. So we saw in the last 20 years, the convergence of cyber and physical systems, of information technology and operational technology. So systems like industrial control systems, operational technology that keep our power grids balanced, our defense platforms ready, our trains on the rails, our ports open. Those systems that were really never designed to be connected to the internet have now converged into cyber physical, IT and OT, or industrial IoT. And we have this array of things. And for the most part, this is enabling us to do more with less. We have ubiquitous sensing platforms that are collecting and aggregating and finding valuable insights and data everywhere for every one of our critical sectors. It's moving our cities to become smart cities. But as this revolution or evolution of data and these industrial revolutions play out, we see the opportunity, but we also see the challenges in front of us. And I'm specifically today going to speak to some of the cybersecurity as well as privacy challenges around some of these creative or disruptive technologies at play. So from cyber physical, from analog to digital, the digital age, one of the other things that we have seen is that the organizations, the platforms that have the ability to collect and aggregate and analyze and transform that data into intelligence and insight, they're also the platforms that enable the monetization of data. And, for years, we've seen a lot of the value. There's incredible value, again, that comes out of that, from everything from balancing the grid to enabling a health ecosystem that can do more with less, better diagnostic, and so on and so forth. We could go across various sectors and point to numerous areas of positive disruption. The challenge we're seeing is that Well, it's easy to monetize that data as we collect, aggregate, create our data lakes pool, find insight, deliver new services, new value. It's much more difficult with all of those three V's of volume, variety, and velocity to secure that data. And securing that data is not easy. It's not cheap. It's resource intensive. And it continues to change. The protocols that we've now, as we've combined our cyber and physical systems, our protocols are different. We have Modbus and DMP3 and Profinet and BACnet. And our building right now here at the university, we have building automation systems and BACnet and all of these proprietary protocols. So as we solve to, increase the connectivity and automation, as we solve to increase the interoperability of these things, this array of things, again, we create new value streams. From a cybersecurity perspective, however, from a privacy perspective, these are grand challenges that we'll have to continue to solve to. And I'll speak to, again, both the disruptive potential of digital twin, blockchain, AI, but we also need to be focused on some of the related challenges. Let's talk definitions quickly, get this out of the way. I sit on a IEEE blockchain standards group, and the spare time I don't have. And I think we spent the last year just arguing over what we're arguing about, or we've spent the last year discussing how do you define blockchain? How do you define distributed ledger technology? What are its critical characteristics? What's a common taxonomy and digital stack that we can use to describe and overcome some of those connectivity, interoperability, security, privacy challenges? Previously, I led digital twin cybersecurity efforts at GE Research with a very talented team. And we solved a number of these grand challenges as it relates to cybersecurity. But with each challenge, we solve new challenges that I'll discuss later around explainable AI, ethical AI, humble AI arrived. Digital twin, again, similar to blockchain, if you talk to 10 blockchain subject matter experts, you're going to get 20 different definitions on what it is, it isn't. Similar to digital twin, I like to use the definition of virtual representation of a physical environment and that has essentially a real-time digital counterpart, a physical object or process. So what is that? A high fidelity, living, breathing, virtual representation of a physical environment. So my use cases are largely around manufacturing. And so how can I move manufacturing from analog, we saw, in the first industrial revolution, to digital and cyber physical convergence with this industrial Internet of Things, to the metaverse, where we're combining AR and VR in virtual environments and finding new ways to not only secure data, but new ways to monetize this virtual metaverse space. So we'll discuss a little bit, instead of focusing on what the metaverse is or isn't, we're going to talk about some of the technologies, again, that are driving us towards this fourth industrial or fifth industrial revolution. Blockchain, again, a number of different definitions. I like to say it's a distributed ledger database that records transactions of value using a cryptographic signature that is inherently immutable. I get really upset when I see that, blockchain is immutable. It can't be changed, and that it's 100% secure, that's a panacea. There's just as many security vulnerabilities with poor blockchain deployments as any distributed computing environment. But some of the related characteristics as we describe blockchain and its potential disruptive potential is it's decentralized. So we don't have single points of failure. So if our digital age has reaffirmed the importance of a data lake and the importance to derive insights from that, we've also been reminded, and we're consistently reminded of what happens when we don't secure that data in transit, at rest. It's almost a daily article in some news media about how a government agency has been hacked or a large organization. And so we're starting to question the value of data, data ownership, data privacy. Who owns our data? What are their responsibilities to secure it? And some of the disruptive ideas around blockchain is if we have this array of things, of cyber physical things that was really never designed with security in mind, well, having a ledger of things to track and trace, to enable non-repudiation of various compute and various transactions is increasingly important. Because again, it's not just about volume and variety, but it's the velocity. And so having the ability to track and trace, having an asymmetric cryptographic hash over sensitive data, your private personal data, but still having the ability to do compute over encrypted data. There's so many exciting use cases, especially in the health space, where you don't trust the hospital or you don't trust the organization that has your personable identify, your PII, your sensitive personal data, but you still want them to be able to derive insights and use asymmetric cryptography, homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation to do compute over encrypted data. And then you want that to be, you want fine grain auditability of that data across enclaves. So some really, really exciting characteristics that are truly, they're really exciting as we look at this next wave of disruptive innovation for across various horizontals. So I discussed briefly metaverse, federated learning when we have digital twins or virtual representations, the ability to use machine learning to learn on top of those twins to gain insight, everything from predictive maintenance to anomaly detection to training. And as we, again, advance our VR and AR and mixed reality, this virtual world that has prodigious sensitive data sets, we need ways not only to protect the security and privacy and attack surface, but find new ways to enable individuals to have ownership over their own data, to retain the ability to monetize their data. So in the metaverse, exciting ideas such as we decode or better understand the human genome in our own code, our own DNA, does our DNA then become an NFT or some type of digital asset that we use to improve diagnostics, to improve drug development, to improve a number of different major challenges we have with therapeutics, vaccine development, zero knowledge proofs, hardware root of trust, again, confidential multi-party collaboration. This is, again, in short, finding new novel ways to gain the insight and intelligence of data without revealing sensitive information on the individual. And you can, there is an hour-long conversation on the math behind that and distributed computing requirements. But it's important to note that with each of these, there are trade-offs oftentimes between speed and efficiency and security. And again, as I mentioned, well, it's easy to monetize collection, aggregation, data analytics. It's very difficult to find novel ways to monetize privacy and security. Cybersecurity has always and traditionally been about buying down risk. We are looking at paradigm shifts to change that. So again, it's, and I've heard, as I recently was told that data is the new oil, and I started to just unravel that a little bit. And it needs to be refined for it to be valuable. It's but then I started to question some of the analogies behind that, right? So I think it's actually data is really the new water, and that we now are living in a digital age that we need data for our survival in many ways. And it's a lot like water in the sense that the Earth's surface is covered by water, but there's only a small percentage of water that can actually be consumed. And similar with data, that it's not just about the volume and variety of data, it's the prep of data, it's how the interoperability of data, how it's consumed and stored and secured, that enables us to transform data into knowledge and wisdom and intelligence. And this is essential as we move to more autonomous Industry 4.0 societies, as we move away from the traditional Ford model of manufacturing to cyber physical autonomous machines, going from knowledge and intelligence to wisdom to empower those machines is really what we're after, to get to a place where we can have a high fidelity, living, breathing manufacturing platform 1,000 miles away, but still have the feel and the smells and all of the senses that you're in the factory with all of the control. And then we can use that twin for predictive maintenance to improve efficiencies, to improve scale, to improve training. And then with all of this, diving into some of the challenges that we will have to overcome. We've seen, and we saw this especially during the last 2 years, as the speed, size, and the volume variety of data increases, protecting that attack surface from these stealthy threats that have increased in their capability, not only to target cyber systems in a very stealthy way, but also physical systems. You no longer need malware to target systems. If you're able to gain access to IT environments that are connected to critical control systems, those control systems can be manipulated. And we continue to see some of these very, very devastating attacks that have moved from now cyber to actually having kinetic damage. It's no longer just malware, it's killware that can have kinetic damage and with significant loss of lives, damage of reputation. And the current cyber defenses, again, were really never designed to protect against these novel stealthy attacks or zero-day exploits. So of the 350,000 new pieces of malware each day, a very small percentage of that is targeting critical control systems. However, again, you don't need malware to target those systems. And we are also seeing a number of new stealthy exploits that are very difficult to detect. So part of the value of digital twin is the ability to start looking at the physics. Well, it's easy to exfiltrate digital data, manipulate ones and zeros. It's very difficult to spoof the physics. And so as you understand the networking levels and the cyber physical layers, the physics, an inferential correlation of the two starts to limit the damage an adversary could do. So now we're not talking about just buying down risk. We're talking about optimizing systems with this type of cybersecurity paradigm shift. One of the things that it's in the same way that cybersecurity is expensive, data privacy. I think we've started to question the value and the ownership of our own data. In the past, we said, well, hey, we get this free app. We have this social networking app that we can see what our friends had for lunch and dinner. And it's free. It's at zero cost. We're starting to question the cost when we realize that our private sensitive data, we are the product. That is what's being collected and aggregated and sold to the highest bidder. We're seeing too the attack surface, especially during the pandemic, as it has expanded, the same solutions that are used to keep adversaries out, VPNs and firewalls, they are being exploited as part of that attack surface. I am going to pause for a second to just get a quick check on time. I know we started a little bit late. If someone could let me know how many minutes we have left. I have a number of slides. I don't think I'm going to get to all of them, but I want to talk to some specific disruptive use cases before concluding.
5 more minutes.
Excellent. Thank you. So we talked about some of these transformations underway. We talked about some of the specific challenges. So what are we doing about it? As I mentioned, moving away from the traditional cybersecurity paradigm of building walls and moats and keeping the adversary out, because of this connectivity, because of this array of things, we need to find new novel paradigms, methods, and technologies to not only detect stealthy adversaries, but to neutralize them. And the way that we are doing that, we are building a biosecure digital twin. Again, a virtual representation of a physical environment and we're understanding what normal looks like. We are, again, at the data acquisition stage as we collect our, build our data lakes, understand what normal looks like. And normal from a cyber networking layer, a TCP/IP or OSI model stack, but also the physics of our control systems and manufacturing, and then comparing the two to better understand, again, saying, okay, well, if the attack surface is just too wide because of our connectivity requirements, can we limit how much damage an adversary can do if they ever get inside our supply chain or systems or networks? And we can do that through building a digital twin of our manufacturing platform. And that requires, again, understanding what normal looks like at each level, understand our Pareto optimum, where we want to sustain this twin. And then on top of that, we can also make advances in analysis, simulation, control, and optimization. As you explore your own digital twin strategy, similar to blockchain, it's absolutely imperative to understand what's the problem you want to solve. What are the interoperability and tech spec requirements? What are the limitations around throughput, latency, cybersecurity, privacy? Go into it with a very clear idea of the problem you want to solve. We're working closely with the GE research team, with SIGASEC, on the blockchain front with SoftThread, a number of other leaders in this space. And again, building a digital industrial immune system that can not only detect and localize these very stealthy attacks, but can also neutralize almost in real time. So if you look at the importance, for example, of bacteria and CRISPR in the human immune system and how it responds to being attacked, how do we do that in a cyber physical world? How do we do it in a world where those 3 V's of volume, variety, and velocity have increased around data? And then how do we do it in a way that is explainable? As we deploy our machine learning, our unsupervised algorithms on these data lakes to derive insights, we're very good at finding patterns, but we are not at a third wave AI ready state where we really understand context. So not only how do we explain how the unsupervised algorithms are arriving at its conclusions, but how do these algorithms stay humble and say, this is outside of my decision manifold. I am not going to neutralize this attacker. I'm not going to perform this physical action, because I don't have the confidence level to do that. And then as it relates to blockchain, a little bit separate use case, it really comes down to, during this digital age, during this revolution, the number of second and third and fourth parties involved in all of these transactions has increased the attack surface. So how do we combine distributed computing, asymmetric cryptography, and other novel aspects of blockchain to disintermediate those many third parties for more efficient processes and new value, new products? And so part of that work has been done through IEEE and developing the standards and taxonomy. But really what this comes down to is trust. How do we trust those third parties to collect, aggregate, analyze our data without data being lost, stolen, exfiltrated, manipulated? And then again, the characteristics around blockchain, the ability to understand the who, what, when, where, why of it, who, what, when, and where of a transaction, have an asymmetric hash of that data, and then do compute and gain insights on top of it. So now you are essentially enabling a privacy preserving, more secure, more distributed way. And with all this, in the same way I mentioned some of the limitations around digital twin and AI, there are a number of legal regulatory challenges behind blockchain. And then with all this, I guess I'd like to conclude that with all of this, we talked a lot about process and technology. There are a number of human machine teams challenges around this. There are some major workforce development challenges around this to really enable the true value to come out of this, some of these disruptive technologies. And one of the biggest ones, not only do we need a multidisciplinary workforce, but we need more diverse teams from different social, economic, ethnic backgrounds, different races, people from different backgrounds. And we need that because the problem set is the data has that volume and variety. Our adversaries that are attacking us are multidisciplinary. They are diverse. We need to respond with solution sets that are not only technology and process, but also strongly reliant on people. I think we forget that oftentimes. And I want, as we explore other big data opportunities and challenges, to not forget about those human factors and those human components that range everything from ethical AI to policy, legal, regulatory, to who owns your data? How do we trust them? Because at the end of the day, a lot of people will say our freedom is predicated on the privacy, our ability to have privacy of our data. And so who owns it and what's their responsibility? I'd like to continue asking some of those questions throughout the day. And again, want to thank the talented team at University of Miami for the opportunity to share some of these opportunities and challenges, as well as a platform to do collaborative research on and overcoming some of these challenges. So again, thank you to Nick Teremos, Mitsu, Dr. Yelena Yesha, and a number of other people, Janina, Jacqueline Green, Evelyn Cruz, and a whole list of other people that made this happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have a few minutes for questions. And if you have questions to Dr. Michael Mylrea, please share your question on your Q&A tab. So it looks like people are a little bit hesitant in asking questions. So maybe I should take advantage of this opportunity. Michael, thank you very much for the great talk and very inspiring. And so you mentioned of human, nature a few times in your talk. And so I'm always fascinated with the idea of a digital twin, and fantastic idea, and very futuristic, and very appropriate in this day and age. Now, I think this is sort of the human nature, in my opinion, that if you think of, if you create a digital twin like a system, people ask a lot from it. So if you are dealing with the physical existence of something, and the people say, okay, there's an error, that's anticipated, we can overlook it. We can be considerate about it. But when it comes to digital, say, a twin, people could be more demanding in its behavior. A more accountability people could ask for. Now, as the concept of digital twin propagates, all the people start using a digital twin in their operation. I'm sort of interested in what's going to happen, meaning many people come up with their systems of digital twin. So a large, manufacturing infrastructure, and the many components are built by different people, different companies, and all of them have their own sort of digital twins. Now you have a complete digital twin, but a part of that is going to be substituted by a newcomer. Then the whole lot of accountability question could be imposed on the new system. Now, as more people come into play in this digital twin domain, the complexity could quickly increase. And so I'm wondering whether you have any sort of words of wisdom as to how we should be approaching this digital twin world in a collaboration or corporations among digital providers of digital twins.
Yeah, as they say, half an answer is in a really good question, and that is an excellent question that I think having these guardrails, especially around the ethics of these explorations, is absolutely imperative, Mitsu. And I talked about cyber and physical and this convergence, but we are quickly seeing we're entering this brave new world of biological, and we're looking at brain-machine interfaces. And so as our digital twins now extend to brain modulation and understanding that, as we start to understand our own DNA, our own genome, our own code, having ethics on how we are able to manipulate that code, that those virtual representations, and everything from autonomous weapon systems to designer babies that design for height and intelligence. And the challenge and the really scary thing with all of that, as we go from cyber physical to biological, that next wave of convergence, to me, what scares me the most is we don't have that precedent. We don't have the legal, we don't have the a lot of the fundamentals to keep those guardrails and keep us directed in an area that's going to keep us ethical and keep us safe. And I'll just add to that too, is that whenever you're talking about a complex system of system, and the stochasticity, the understanding of biology and how it evolves, we don't fully understand it. And so, as you know, a bad code in a digital twin, yeah, that's kind of scary. Like if you deploy a flock of drones that has a kinetic capability to take out an adversary, yeah, that's really scary. And there's a number of ethical things. But what about when we start manipulating, as we're doing now, our own genetic code and not fully understanding the biology and the stochasticity and what could potentially that evolve to? So yeah, excellent question, Mitsu, that really requires a multidisciplinary group of experts like you have here at University of Miami to answer. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question, a couple of questions. One question and a comment in the Q&A. The first is, do you consider that the blockchain could be used to replace the traditional economic system?
I don't think it's going to replace, but it will disintermediate. If you look at the many third parties that are required, let's say in electricity infrastructure, in the healthcare space, we still have very centralized, archaic models. And so I think if anything in the near term, you're going to see more disintermediation of some of those third parties to find new efficiencies. I think you're going to look at some near time, we're seeing a lot of it out of decentralized finance and fintech, I think are early adopters, but we're going to start to see, I think the next big $1 trillion companies will increasingly be in the energy space, where you have let's say, Uber of energy that's able to look at the current data that's being transacted and find new novel ways to incorporate distributed energy resources and other intermittent loads into our grid. But yeah, what an exciting space. It'll certainly be transformative and disruptive. And I think, I do a lot, I've done a lot of advisory to large organizations in the past. I say at the very least, you should look at blockchain and how it's disruptive, because I can guarantee you your competitors are.
Okay, thank you. So there was a comment on the Q&A. It's not a question, but the audience is thanking you for signaling the importance of applied ethics in this nature. Now, we are out of time. So again, thank you very much, Michael, for inspiring talk. We hope to hear from you very soon in the many the events that are hosted by the IDSC. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait for this to be in person next year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Alex Moura. He actually is from and from the business school. So it's a bit of an opportunity for the business school to co-brand this conference alongside IDSC. Alex calls himself as a technologist with a strong passion for innovation and creating new products. He leads the Insights and Analytics team for Latin America at MasterCard. He is basically in charge of product management and advanced analytics in their data and services division. He's a recognized thought leader and he believes in digital transformation and innovation. He started his career with the Brazilian Navy and then went on to the Ernst & Young's Technology Group and Security Services Group. Then he had a stint at Royal Caribbean Cruises, which was responsible for the business intelligence and payments. Alex has a lot of insights on how big data and AI can be exploited in the business world. So without further ado, I'm not going to stand between Alex and the crowd. Okay, go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for the invitation. Thank you, the University of Miami Institute for Data Science Computing for the invitation. I cannot express how happy and how honored I am to be here, right? So I think that this university has been a big part of my life, right? So it changed my life in many ways. Actually, I started my career as a Navy officer with engineering background. And ever since I had the opportunity to study at the University of Miami, I think I have many learnings that I took along the way with me. So it's a pleasure. Today, what I would like to talk, it's a little bit about a mix, right? So I want to give a little bit of context, right? So I think in business, we try to, I think between disruption and application, we need to be super quick, right? And I would like to give a context, right? So just go back a little bit where we're seeing the entire data revolution taking place. Put into the context where we are in the industry today, and also give a few use cases. I think I probably could speak for the entire day if I had to talk about all use cases, but the idea is to give a glimpse, right? So I also try to, as I know there are many students that are in the audience, just try to give a few examples, right? So how your expertise, how your talent, how your passion can be used in data science, right? So it's just a phenomenal time to be in this area right now, right? So I would like to start, and yes?
Yeah, good.
Okay, so I'd like to go back a little bit, 25 years, right? 25 years in the past. And the reality is we have been experienced like major technology evolutions. I'm gonna mention a few names here. Google, Twitter, Netflix, Uber, Amazon, AWS. None of these companies existed 25 years ago, right? So they are a major part of the way we live, the way we do business, and they were not in existence 25 years ago. I think, we're seeing changes in evolution technology, and I'm putting the first one here as broadband, right? So, and you may ask, Alex, why not internet instead of broadband? I think, those two concepts are connected, but I think, broadband was, I think when we started with internet, gave us the ability to connect. I think with broadband, we were able to connect more efficiently than you were before. Right, so the exponential increase on efficiency for a business use was incredible, and you see with the increase of speed, right? So the uses are becoming even more versatile, right? So let me give you like a very simple example. Uber would not be possible with Internet 2.0. Right. So when you talk about the increase of a capacity of broadband, this is bringing more real time, is decreasing the latency and bringing more real time opportunities. Right now, we're not even talking about real time interaction. We're talking about real time actions. Right. So in a way that we are envisioning maybe in the future, remote surgeries, right? So I'm not sure if I'm ready for remote surgery, right? So I had a surgery recently. I was very scared, but if you think of in many places on the planet, right? So where doctors are scarce, this could be, right? So an opportunity where specialists could not travel in able time to save a patient. This could be an opportunity. Mobile, right? So let's just go back. For how long we have real smartphones in the world? It's not that long, right? So the iPhone was launched in 2007, and that completely changed the world, right? So we'll talk about an internet communicator, a computer, you know, the Steve Jobs presentation, but it was much more than that. Things that, you know, I don't think even Steve Jobs could think of the time how important it would be, how many application use cases would come from that innovation. APIs, right? So this is more in the tech side, but the reality is, I think APIs, to me, the way usually when I speak for non-technical audiences, I have to contextualize what API is, and I always say, listen, that's the tech way for making companies talk and exchange information, right? It's a little bit of a rough explanation, but at the end, in essence, it's really that. And if you think of the great innovations, right? So when you talk about standing, I love this expression, right? So standing on the shoulder of the giants. And I always tell my team, so just remember the giant, and just try to climb with the giant, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think that the APIs are a core to it, right? So you'll be able to develop work and make your work available for someone to build on it is incredible. Another example that, you know, without like a fair and efficient use of APIs, many of the services that you have today will simply not exist. Social, right? Social is an interesting thing, right? So social allows us to connect with friends, connect in different ways, maybe change the way we interact with people. And you may have your judgment, good or bad, how reserved or how open you are. And I think the social by itself, social media had changed over time, right? But social had a big impact on society, maybe elections, depending how you see this. But social has also allowed ever increasing production of data, right? So data that's very personal, the data that reflects what you think, data that reflects how you feel, data reflects how we all feel, a collective feedback in real time. The cloud. I think the cloud, I love the definition is, listen, there's no cloud, it is someone else's computer. Well, I love this definition because it's simple, but I think it's incomplete, right? So it's someone else's computer that you can we don't have to make a business case for it. We don't have to spend millions for it. You can rent service as much as you want, right? So let's just get out of the technology and talk about a real case, right? So in the past, you are a person with a great idea, and this great idea required technology. And what would you do? Well, you have to pitch your idea 100,000 times to someone, and maybe your idea is not even good, but you need to pitch this idea. You have to have funding, you have to buy servers, you have to hire developers before you even try your idea, which may not work the first time. Most ideas don't work the first time. Well, so how many times you're going to succeed doing this? How many times people are going to trust you with a few $1 billion without a proven idea? I think the cloud simplifies that. So if you have a great idea, you have computer skills, you are able to code, you understand how cloud works. You can leverage many services, right? So, and I'm a very fan of the cloud, and I'm impressed in the last 2 years how much progress, like the major platform, I'm talking about Azure, AWS, Watson, they made on artificial intelligence, right? So I'm a fan of AutoML, and it's getting more easier and easier to do machine learning, right? So it still doesn't exclude. I think that many people are questioning if you're going to still need data scientists. We will, right? So I think, but I don't think that we miss, right, like a lot of the work, the manual coding that we do. There will still be a lot of that. Data is still coming in all sorts of forms, right? So, but I think, you know, being more efficient and be able to, for a business perspective, to have more people trained like in a more easier fashion, we also drive efficiency for society. AR, VR, right? So I think, and Michael mentioned the metaverse. I think metaverse is a big topic right now. I'm convinced, right? So I think it is something that is going to change the way we live. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the idea of me become an avatar, right? But I think, you know, the idea of you being able to communicate in real time, like with expressions, as if you were in an environment, is just powerful, right? So we have an ever aging population, right? So you've got to maybe be able to give access to experience that, you know, our elderly, we in the future, you wouldn't enjoy otherwise. You may be able to give access to individuals that will not be able to travel or experience or have different experiences, right? So I think this is powerful. I think will change the way we live ever again. There's one common, and this is just a selected few innovations that happened in the last 25 years. There is one common theme on all those, is that all of those are creating a lot of data. A lot of data that's very personal, a lot of data that is very precise about the way we behave, the way we live. Lots of data. So I wanted to see how much data is that, right? So I did some research and I found that this number, we expect, right? So you see we start in 2010 with 2 zettabytes of data. But in 2025, according to the Statista, we are supposed to have 181 zettabytes of data. Now, I could not wrap my head around what 181 would be, right? So I was preparing, and I did this research. I was preparing a presentation for an industry conference in Ecuador. And I thought, I said, you know what, would be a cool idea if this data, if I print on a piece of paper, if I could cover Ecuador. Let's see if I can cover Ecuador with all this data. So I did a number, right? So it is like now Arial 12. So if you guys want to reproduce in alphanumeric, and I saw like what surface it would be covered if you print all this 181 zettabytes of data. Well, it was a little bit more than Ecuador. Actually, if you print this data, don't do it, please. But if you print this data, you could cover the Earth 4 times, right? So bottom line, it's a lot of data. I can tell you that in terms of definition, it's funny because Michael mentioned the traditional definition of big data, the visual big data, volume, variety, and velocity. I think, you know, and I always expand, right? So this is, I think that the first 3 are the most solid, but I always expand to veracity and value, right? So, and veracity, I think, is a V word for quality, right? So I think when you are working in business, I think the challenge is not just data. Actually, there's no shortage of data, is to understand what data should we need, for how long we should keep, and how we're gonna measure quality of this data, right? So I don't think there's a single day that I get into a meeting and there's discussions and debates about quality of data, right? So I think the first question is, what is quality of data? We know that we spend a whole lot of time cleaning data. We know that we spend a whole lot of time trying to define how to use data, but what is quality, right? So I think this, in business, there's one of the, and I always try to do this in projects, right? So how do we define quality? How much is enough, right? So how much becomes counterproductive? That's a little bit of expansion of the visa in big data that I like to use. And the last one is value, right? So I think, you know, we can spend a lot of time just doing really interesting analysis, right? So it could be macroeconomic analysis, it could be finding opportunities. But the question is, what do you do with this now that you transition from data into knowledge, maybe wisdom? What do you do with that? Is it actionable, right? So, and one exercise that I always try to ask the teams to do is, let's just do this analysis before, right? So if we prove our hypothesis and you find something in this data, you find an insight, how can you derive value, right? So, and I think for a practical purpose, why is this important, right? So we can show up in an executive meeting with lots of information, and there will always be the question. It's a fair question we should always ask ourselves. So what? How do we actually serve our clients better? How do we decrease costs? What do we do? Right. So that's I think that's a question that for those of you who are starting your career, or for those of you who are professionals, just like it's a good exercise to do, like when you're leading projects, and also ask your team to do. So example of big data, and I will be biased here. I'll give the example that I'm close to, and legal let me disclose is MasterCard, right? So we have 2.7 billion cards, 9 billion plus 9 billion, more than 9 billion transactions per year, 60 million merchants, 15 petabytes of data. I don't know if you can cover Ecuador with that, but that's 15 petabytes. I can do the number. 1.9 million automated, but 1.9 million automated rules to cleanse data, right? And I can tell you that we are evolving from data rules to automated machine learning to cleanse data. We have more than like 150 data products, right? So each one has some nuances that we use the data for. I think the next evolution is just to automate all this 1.9 million rules into machine learning rules, right? So there are I think there's a big opportunity, but there is also challenges, right? So I think one of the challenges of automating rules and subtracting the human out of it is, I think and I think was mentioned by one of the questions in the Q&A is ethics, right? Data ethics, bias, right? So how do you, if you're automating everything, if you are getting just output from data, how are you testing for bias, right? So do you have the right insight, right? So is your team diverse enough they can check for the right insight? So those are questions that we are constantly asking ourselves, right? So what do you automate, and is the data behind this automation free of bias? Right, so I can tell you that in many cases, when we do the analysis, we find that there are nuances that we need to improve. Right, so I think that's a warning side here, and also a pledge that I ask everybody that's worked with data, please do check for bias, because I think the data they're using today was built in a world that may not be the same world that we want to promote in the future. We have over 2,000 data science and engineers, right? So this doesn't fully count everybody that works with data. And I think that work with data today, understanding data, seeing strategies to data is everybody's job, right? So, but just focus on data science and data service division, we have over 2,000 data science and engineers. Not only that, right? So I think there's things that are evolving so fast. Business evolving so fast, commerce evolving so fast. You guys are here about everything, right? Blockchain, you're hearing about cryptocurrency, people interact in different ways. We are also acquiring different companies, both for the technology itself and also to bring talent, right? So there's, I wanted just to give one example, a practical example of how big data works in practice, right? So, and that's what we do at MasterCard. All this data is creating a change, like a major shift in us humans, right? So especially as we start with expectations, right? So we are seeing our life digitized. We are seeing the use cases digitized. Consumers are changing expectation. They are, from video on demand, literally they us, right, need and expect everything on demand. right? So that is incredible. That is great. But from a financial industry perspective, that starts to impose a major burden and a major pressure on modernization. Why, right? So we have like, when you give valuables, or when you store or give valuables or lend valuables to a party, right? So there are a number of measures that we have to take. So it's know your customer regulations. We have privacy constraints, right? So all that, in theory, takes time, and it's supposed to take time. It's supposed to be done responsibly. But again, the consumer still has the expectation, right? So what we're seeing is that industries are changing, and they're required to change. I'll give a few examples here that everybody knows. I'll not spend too much time. Transportation, right? So for those of you, taxi cabs, the yellow cabs are still there, but reality is, we are using other devices, right? So like our fingers to flag a taxi, they still work, but we like the fact that we are told when the driver is going to arrive, right? So we know that there is like some sort of communication between you and the driver. You're able to. There's a feedback loop, right? So it was a technology innovation that is causing behavioral change. Media. Right, so this was one of the most sold issues of the New York Times. Well, we didn't sell many. The New York Times didn't sell many actual papers when a commercial company, right, a private company, actually took the first NASA crew to the moon. Right, so that's kind of impressive, right? So we had like a private company take the NASA astronauts to the moon. By the way, in a much cheaper fashion. That's why they're doing. There's one interesting fact on this right side picture that I am showing to you here, and relates to one of the comments that Michael made. Michael said, "We are the product," right? So it's funny because when I went to get this screenshot, there was a paywall, and I could not get the screenshot. And I had to pay $1 to get the information. And so that's fair. Well, we used to pay for the print version. Now we need to pay for the digital version. Well, there was an option where I could just click and give my email information, and then I could access for free, right? So I thought maybe I'm just selling my information for $1, right? So, and if you think it over, that at least my access, my email, my information, my demographics was worth enough of $1 for the New York Times to give me access, right? So this is the type of thing that I think it is an evolution. It also goes back to, okay, how we are treating personal information, right? So what kind of the uses of personal information that we are using when you're conducting business? I think there's a question you always need to ask. Banking, right? So banking, and now I find in banking. Banking forever has been an institution where purposefully you had like big branches. We had like that would bring the idea of security, right? So you didn't need that big building to have a bank, but the idea of having your valuables in a safe place was brought together with the security of the building, right? So, and I look at it and say, yeah, that's true. I have this idea too, because I'm an old person. So I asked my daughter, listen, if you had to, and she was 16 at the time, and I asked her, if you had to open a bank account, what would you do? And she told me, I thought that, she will go to the internet, right? So she's very savvy. And she told me, I'll go to the App Store. I was shocked. I said, you're going to where? To the App Store? I said, yes. So immediately I thought, okay, if she's going to the App Store, a bank that doesn't have an app is automatically excluded. But the most concerning thing is that even the banks that have apps, and most banks have apps, at least in the US, you cannot open an account. right? So there will be a few disruptors that would grab this young market share because they're able to grasp on the opportunity, right? So, and that's, banking today. So with that, what I like to do is just to give you a glimpse of 5 applications, right? So top 5 applications that we're seeing in big data and in 5 top applications, big data and AI that we're seeing financial service. First one, risk management, right? So I'm gonna mention 2 cases. One case is the one that usually people think about and say, wow, so if you're using automated rules, AI for risk management, is to check if the transaction is fraud or not. And those have existed, honestly, for a long while. But the type of speed and the type of refinement that we're able to get is much more granular today. So like the improvement that I cannot share exact number, but the improvements that we're seeing with the new systems is just something tremendous. But there's a second use case that I want to share because I think there's a broader and more a social impact on that, right? So credit risk, right? So using AI and big data, especially availability of alternate data for credit scoring. What does that mean, right? So I think in banking, the biggest challenge was you can only give credit to someone that has a credit history. Well, but if you don't have a credit, the reason that a lot of times don't have a credit risk history is because we are not in the banking system in the first place. So there was this self-fulfilling bias, right? So where if you are already disadvantaged, you continue to be disadvantaged, right? So I think what we're seeing right now, and there are different banks, there are different fintechs that are doing this, is just use alternate source of data for credit scoring, right? So we may not be. So you may be a person that's willing to pay or able to pay. You have a profile that shows that you could be a low risk borrower, but you don't have credit, right? So what we are seeing is that we are able to connect to this data source with permission, of course, to have a scoring of risk. And what we're seeing is that it's being profitable, right? So if you are able to recognize those consumers are very profitable. They're not giving credit anywhere. So there's a few takeaways from here, right? So one is inclusion, right? So we're not going to be a society that we are fair to everybody if you continue to exclude people from the financial services, right? So right now, like having access to a credit card, being access to pay online, it means that is a binary event where you may or may not have access to the service, right? So if you don't have if you're not able to buy online, there's a lot of you are automatically excluded from many of the amenities of society, right? So that's number one, right? So for inclusion. And the second is business, right? So that is a business to be made with these folks while helping them to get included, right? So that's one case that there are several different versions, but there's a major use case that the industry is exploring. Targeted marketing, right? So I think with the advent of internet, we had like this big free for all. Let's just send marketing messages to everybody, and soon your mind share became a very limited real estate. Our mind share, right? So if I receive 5 emails from you, you automatically go to my mind spam filter, right? So I think the idea of target marketing is really to optimize, right, the attention, is to add value to the consumer along the journey, right? So actually my team, I work with banks, right? So to utilize just the information that MasterCard has from the banks, right? So with permission, the information that the bank has to try to optimize, right? So based on the demographics, based on the product, based on the information that all the services that are already bought by the consumers with the bank, the existing relationship, to optimize their marketing, right? So offer the right service to the right person, the right time, and for the right price, right? So there are many facets of that. That it may be platform. I think the evolution that we're seeing is that this is ever more real time. It will not be something that will be feasible without the latest technology, right? Authentication, identity. We'll talk about metaverse. We'll talk about blockchain. We'll talk about different things, right? So, but for us to be able to have our digital version online, security is a must, right? So it's a must, with the same principles of credit, what we're seeing is that with the same principles that are used to create credit scores, we are seeing being used in authentication identity, right? So we are having a validation for identity being drawn from different sources in a way to create your I would say the best non-technical way to describe it would be your digital DNA, right? So that's a good way to describe. Operation optimization. This has been, for a while, that IT has for 30 years have been trying to do this. But now I think we can really connect different data sources, right? So I think there's no excuse not having data in a company that cannot be used for optimization. And we can talk about different things, right? We can talk about manufacture, we can talk about shipping, we can talk in my world, right? So how do we optimize the performance of our products, of apps, right? So how do you recognize defects early in the phase of a product? Right, so those are signs that will not be possible without both the data and the data platforms that enable this type of analysis. Last, customer service. A lot of times you think about bots, right? So I think bots are automated response systems are part of the equation, right? So, but I'm very excited with the ideas that we would have automated responses when they fit, but we also have a better handover, a warmer, I would say, handover to humans to better serve the customer, right? So what we're seeing that, when this done right, the type of customer satisfaction just jumps in a way that, is incredible to see, right? So it's, I think it improves the value that you as a company, you provide to the consumer. But there are challenges, right? Key challenge for adoption. First one, a lot of technology options. I just listed here the open source systems that are work with big data. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with those. I think the biggest question that I get is, Alex, where do I start? How do we start? Right. So and those technology options are evolving, right? So and that gets us to second topic, governance and methodology, right? So I think that the biggest mistake over my career, I did consulting for a while, and I used to see, we used to jump in the latest toys, jump into the latest methodologies, right? So I think alignment between the business objectives and the platforms and skill set, I think, is paramount, right? So it's something that discussion needs to occur in a business environment, and that's actually the only way that I've seen succeed, right? So governance methodology, the entire life cycle data governance is important. And here again, right? So I think, as we evolve into methodologies, into new technologies, the idea of looking into the data, looking to privacy, looking to ethics is incredibly important. Last but not least, and I think it's important for all of you, high demand for analytical skills, right? So I think those are, for us, it's a constraint a lot of times, right? So it's hard to find analytical skills, especially in the early career levels. And I think that there has never been a better time to be in data, right? So, but I think the caveat here is that a lot of times when you think about data and you work with data, is about the data scientist. Yes, there will be data science too, right? So I purposely put here like a group of probably data scientists looking to a bell curve. But the reality is, I think the data skills, the data literacy, the citizen data scientist will be important across the board, right? So whether you're gonna, and you're probably gonna evolve in your career, and you are evolving your career in data, right? So you're gonna see many of you are working on analytical jobs and evolving to business, right? So I think the one common theme is that our labor, our workforce will need to be more data versed, right? So, and I think that's is a great time to invest in your career in data, if you are in school, right? And if you are in the workforce, there's also shortage, right? So there's also opportunities to improve, right? So if you ask me, Alex, would you like to be born again? I say, I'm not sure. Would you like to be born maybe 20 years later? And I say, well, maybe I would, because there will be like much cooler toys for me to work with, and data will be much more advanced, right? So I'm very curious what the future will bring. Last but not least, right? So if you slept through the entire presentation, I always like to recap at the end. Let me recap. The new digital world is data rich, right? So it's there for us to grab, right? So we need to recognize what data is important for us and how we're going to use it. There are great challenges and opportunities, right? So I like to always look for the opportunities, right? So, but let's not forget some caveats, right? So we need to use data for good. We need to use data to make the world a better place, right? So it's always ask, okay, is this use that this great use that I'm doing of data, is this making the world better, our communities better? Last but not least, there's never been a better time to pursue a career in data. So if you're starting a career, if you're mid-career, it's a great time, right? So there's a lot of knowledge out there. I really recommend you to pursue. You know, if you need, if you have the time, or if you need any support, guidance, having the time, please reach out. I'm happy to have a discussion, right? And once again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Alex, for bringing us from the world of science and philosophy to the world of money and business. That was a nice talk. Wonderful examples. We actually are running into the break time, but I have one question from the chat, which says, how do you? I mean, I'm summarizing the question. How do you value, or how can consumers value or put a price on the data they give up? Like you gave up, you said $1 for your demographics. How could we value that kind of data? How?
I think we as consumers, we do every day, right? So it's the utility that we're getting from that data sharing. I made an immediate decision. Is giving my email worth saving $1? And I even pondered, but when I realized that even to pay the $1, I have to share my email anyways, I decided to give my information. But I think that's a good point, right? So as you look, consumers, they make, especially in the US, right? So I think we are more open in the US to share our personal information. I think, society in general needs to be educated to ponder well this question. Am I getting the utility that I need for giving my data, or I'm just the product, right? So, and I think that's a question that, if you ask me, we should be teaching in primary school, in kindergarten. So children are always thinking, are we getting the utility for the information we share?
Sure. Someday this question will be brought up, especially by the legal folks somewhere.
You should.
Thank you so much. We are actually now going in for a short break, and we'll be coming back around 3:30. I'd just like to thank both Alex and Michael for the first part of this conference. So we'll take a break and we'll get back together at 3:30, 10 minutes.
So welcome back, everyone, to the second half of a big data conference. We will start with the panel session in the second half of the conference. And I would like to introduce the moderator of the panel session, Dr. Nick Chinoremas. Dr. Nick Chinoremas is the director of Institute of Data Science and Computing, leading the university's effort in research in data science. Also, he is wearing a hat as Vice Provost for Research and Research Computing and Data. And he is helping the university to revolutionize its operation in research and data science, and morphing into a new generation of university. Dr. Tsineremas has many years of experience, not only in industry and but also in academia. So he is bringing to the university's computing world the best of the both worlds. So without further ado, here is Dr. Tsineremas.
Thank you, Mitsu, and thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you all. I welcome you again to this to our conference. This is actually, I'm sure that, well, you've heard, this is our 6th year actually that we're running this conference. Our 2nd year that it's digital, and we're hoping next year actually to have it in person. So this is where actually this conference we're taking it over the past few years, and we're trying to discuss a little bit about the new transformational technologies, especially in the 4th digital revolution, if you will, which is the data revolution. But we also have a number of different transformational technologies that they are coming and they are being developed over the years. Of course, the data is playing a big role of that. The reason that we have things like artificial intelligence is because we have a lot of data, right? You heard about the zettabytes of data that we are accumulating. And I would like actually to have today to introduce our panel here. We have a pretty diverse panel, and that's why we did this on purpose, because we wanted actually to understand and discuss a little bit of how this kind of transformational technologies are applying into different type of sectors, from the public sector all the way to actually larger companies, technology companies, but also startup companies. So that's actually the purpose of this panel. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to introduce now our panelists, and that we're going to spend about half of the time actually discussing and asking questions to the panel, and then we are going to open it to our audience to submit their questions. So I'm going to now, I'm not going to ask our panelists for the interest of time to introduce themselves. I will actually introduce them, and then I will ask the question. So I will go with the order that I see them on my screen on the Zoom. So we have first here Margaret Brisbane. She's the CIO of the Miami-Dade County. We have Matthew Danasek. He's the Senior Vice President of Analytics and AI at the Royal Caribbean. We also have Diego Berta, who is the Senior Vice President for Business Development for Magic Leap. And let me see, we also have here actually Lieutenant Joel Bello, from the Miami-Dade Police Department, Arthur Cordon with Cordon Consulting, he's the CEO of the Cordon Consulting, and last but not least, we have here our Dean of Architecture here at the University of Miami, Rudy el-Khoury. So with that, and I would like actually to start our panel discussion with a pretty broad, generic question, which is, again, we have a pretty diverse panel here, but I would like them to speak a little bit about how this new digital revolution has affected their organization, how this has actually transformed their organizations, but also how perhaps in the communication or the interactions with their, if you will, customers or users has also transformed that kind of relationship, what they see from their perspective. And let me start again with Margaret. Margaret, if you can basically let us know about how, Miami-Dade County has been receiving this kind of new digital technologies.
Well, Nick, it's an honor to be on this panel with these esteemed panel members. I can tell you, as a county, we are looking at where we are today compared to even a year and 2 years ago. As Alex said, we are all data rich and information poor. And this is evident every day for us. We run a county of 26 different departments, And as you can imagine, we are generating data from these various lines of business, and we have the opportunity to really harness that data and use it, not just use it, but use it for good. And I think we're seeing where, you know, our new mayor is really focused on how do we use data to serve our citizens much better. We recently launched our Peace and Prosperity program within Miami-Dade County, and that's where we're going to leverage data from various aspects of our county. You look at how can we impact the lives of the youth within our community, and so we look at crime data, we look at data in social services, we look at census data, and we look at program data. So, you know, where are we providing opportunities for youth to participate in the programs at the parks to keep them off the street, which ultimately impacts maybe some of the crime that we have in our city. You know, as a government entity, I think we are recognizing the importance also of having relationships across municipal governments, because when we solve these challenges in our community, it is not just within Miami-Dade County. No one knows where those lines are between the county and the city of Miami and Coral Gables and Hialeah. This is just, we all live in Miami-Dade. And so we need to be able to leverage data across these entities. And so we are starting to look at these relationships so we can run and have a smarter government, not just the one we're responsible for, but the one that our citizens expect us to deliver on. I think, you know, as we look at how we are leveraging these technologies, we start looking, and I'll just refer back to our recent catastrophic event at Surfside for the collapse. We never really used drone a lot in our IT department, but that created an opportunity to partner with an academic institution. FSU brought in their team, and they were using drones that had thermal sensing equipment, and that was able to really help our firefighters and the folks who were really on that ground providing service. They collected lots of data that ultimately we were able to use to create maps in our GIS systems. They measured damage. So, you know, there's just a lot that we have used data for. And I think if you look back 2 years ago, we would never have imagined the value of using data as we have today. And that is just, you know, just to tell you, again, we have to make sure all the relationships we have with business and academia are mutually beneficial to the citizens that we're serving.
Great, thank you, Margaret. Now, let me change a little bit, and I will go actually to, let me go to Matt, who is actually heading the data effort in Royal Caribbean. So to let us know, how about, you know, a large company actually in the hospitality industry is viewing this kind of, you know, digital revolution with the data, so.
Yeah, so there's a few dimensions of that, and you know, you'd be challenged to say almost, you know, what area of the business is not being largely impacted by digital transformation and data. And just on the, and I usually look at the digitalization and sort of software capabilities as hugely important, but different, a bit different from the what we would call big data or advanced analytics or AI-driven capabilities. On the digital side, I mean, we're, you know,
did we lose Matt?
Yeah, I think we lost Matt. Why don't you just go ahead?
So probably we'll go back a little bit more, and let's stay actually a little bit with the public sector, and let's go to Joel to tell us a little bit about how the Miami-Dade Police Department is viewing this topic, and what are perhaps some of the things that they are actually engaged, and what they would like perhaps to do to be even doing more.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. You know, we're trying to leverage technology to our advantage. Unfortunately for us, you it seems that criminals tend to stay usually a few steps ahead of us in every category of crime. But in the tech world, they seem to be a little bit even more ahead of that. So we're a little bit behind. We're catching up. Having people on board like Margaret that bring that knowledge of the tech world and helping implement some of these systems help. But one of the problems we're having is we have a lot of data available. Margaret mentioned it, data rich and information poor. A lot of the systems that we've deployed throughout the county are very good at solving a single problem. For example, the ShotSpotter system that we've deployed throughout Miami-Dade County that allows us to identify and pinpoint where shots are being fired real time. The problem with that system is that system doesn't interface and interact with other systems like the GPS in our vehicles so that we can readily deploy the nearest officer to that scene. So the call goes throughout the entire district. The officer is dependent on where that officer is listening to the radio and not occupied at that moment. And he doesn't get like a special message that he is the nearest person to that particular call. So interoperability and better interface between these systems will largely help us solve some of these problems. And the systems individually will work together, but because we buy them from different vendors, they don't often communicate with each other. So it's back to relying on the human factor, right? And we cannot process information fast enough. So until we become a little bit better at leveraging AI to monitor these systems and to link up these different systems, we're going to be a little bit behind the eight ball. This week, for example, talking about how technology has affected us, we've responded to 30 different threats to shoot schools throughout Miami-Dade County. As a result of those 30 different schools, we've had to monitor between 300 and 500 different calls and different means, whether it was through social media. So there's an overabundance of information, and a lot of the information that was coming in is repeated information. It's not good information. So, the problem becomes going through all of that information. So we're trying to keep up. We're trying to deploy the best solutions for some of these problems, but the criminals seem to be a little bit ahead of us in this, and as it is right now.
Great, thank you, Joel. I mean, I think this is a great, segue that you get us basically of what are the opportunities that we all have, in this big era. So I'm going to change a little bit, and I'm going to go to Diego. And Diego is actually coming from a technology development company, and using this kind of mixed reality, extended reality, and spatial computing, which also enabled, because we are able to see our own world with our data and bring it actually, instead of actually sitting in front of a computer. Imagine if we are also going to actually carry our computer on our on our eyes, and we can see the world through our eyes, but through a computer and our eyes together. So Diego, tell us a little bit about how you think this kind of transformational technologies can influence different areas of our living environment, if you will, from the way that we do business to the way that we do our everyday life, everyday life.
Thank you, Nick. First of all, before I begin, let me tell you how happy I was when Nick asked me to join this panel and the event. So it's an honor being here, and more than happy to provide a little bit of insight on the technology side of things. Before I begin and I share my opinion with you, the opinions I will express in this panel today are mine alone, and they do not convey the opinions of views of Magic Leap on this subject. Just so everyone's clear. On the point that Nick brings up, I think the gentleman that was speaking just a moment ago brings up a good point, which is how is it there's all this technology, and what is it that we're doing with it? I think there are a few components that we have to have in mind as I'll speak about my perspective on this, and and where technology is heading with this. I think it is the evolution of technology, and I would argue with you even more important is how it is that humans are interacting with that technology to drive value. I always make the comparison of an artist and a chisel, and technology at the end of the day is a tool, is a chisel, and what the sculpture is built and what the final outcome is purely at the end of the day a result of a vision, the artist, or in this case, the end user and the utility that is needed, right? In this case, would be a police department, as Joel brought up a moment ago. So there are a few things. There are a few things I think are worth highlighting. We are, I believe, at the cusp of another transformation. I think if we look at our past, we can perhaps let history be our best teacher. In the 40s, we had enterprise computing, which were these monstrous pieces of machinery that created the first breakthrough in computing for enterprises and for the workplace and institutions. Then in the 60s was the advancement and new innovation of personal computing, which was essentially the miniaturization of all these components and systems that were created a few decades before. In the 70s, we have the advancements of mobile computing. And I don't know if you remember, but the first mobile phones were these massive bricks, and I have to remind us all that many of those massive original bricks came out of Broward County in the Motorola facility that were created there for Motorola's R&D efforts. So even Florida has a great history in the vector of that innovation. So mobile computing and cell phone technologies and everything that comes with it in our normal lives is, I believe, is reaching to its peak of adoption, and and all the things that we can do with it. For the last 10 years, we have observed, and please understand my bias because I've been deep in the weeds of this for the last 10 years, but we have observed the next wave of computing, which is spatial computing. There are many nomenclatures thrown around. You may have heard VR, AR, XR. It is at the end of the day, the notion is to have this digital layer that it'll enhance human capabilities. How that affect the workplace is, from my perspective, is a very interesting opportunity. It's a very interesting challenge as well. I think in the workplace, it'll create this level of innovation that, from a technology perspective, because people are not going to do the type of work they used to do in the same fashion. And I always like to give the examples of probably architecture or product design. I have had the opportunity, if you see the workflows of many of these professionals, a lot of this work is done via 2D screens, or sometimes even some of the old school folks are more artistically driven. They do it by hand and paper, and that's where they start. Many of the tools that we'll see in the next wave of innovation will allow us to interact literally, to immerse ourselves into these digital models. And to me, once the workplace and the workforce experience this type of innovation and new way of doing things, that is a point of no return. It deeply affects the way people do things for some of these disciplines. I have had the personal opportunity, the blessing of working in these things for a few years, and I have been literally immersed in the models of a new car, where real-time designers are inside this car designing and tweaking what otherwise would be just a CAD model on their laptop. It's the same thing when you see it on a physical space, such as a building, where you have these design renderings that help architects make decisions on where things should go. Having the ability to interact and visualize this real time shortens minimizes the ability to the potential to make errors. It creates a greater opportunity to interact with clients and interact with the data and the options. In essence, the whole asset becomes a lot more of an interactive experience. And because of that interaction, that new paradigm of interaction with data, this virtual modality, it allows people to gain greater insights and literally have a different experience, and it's a point of no return from my perspective. I have a lot more, but I'll pause there.
Right. Thanks, Diego. Let's go now to go to Arthur, and Arthur actually has got a very long and distinguished experience actually working with a number of different large companies and so forth. And we would love to hear his perspective about how he sees, that in this new digital age, the companies adjust, adapt, move forward, change, or perhaps die if, they don't do that fast enough. So, Arthur, you are muted.
They must change, otherwise they'll die. And last year's COVID crisis is a very clear challenge for this. And my key client is one of the largest manufacturer of paper that includes toilet paper. And you saw what had happened in March last year. And here is one of the options that this challenge created, by the way. But let's be very generic. What I see from most of these manufacturing corporations, they had increased the usage of big data, especially in AI, in the last couple of years. And above all, I see the key direction of usage is making their decision-making process more accurate by using forecasting data. The area of forecasting had grown tremendously with the new forecasting methods. All complex types of models are now gradually integrated with the business decisions. But the challenge that we had is another lesson in March last year. When the COVID happened, we didn't have data what to do. We could not train models in the classical way as machine learning is doing. That's why we were pushed to explore another way to compensate the lack of knowledge and data through some simulations, through the technology called intelligent agents. And we were in the same situation this fall when the supply chain crisis happened. This is a mirror of the previous crisis in spring last year. So the lesson is we have to be open, and we have to think about this situation, how to act, how to make decisions when we don't have data. That's one of the lessons I learned.
Thank you, Arthur. And then let's switch it up again a little bit more, and let's go a little bit in a different area. And I think that Diego touched a little bit about, how architecture is changing, with XR and VR and this kind of technologies. But also I would like to go to Rudy and ask him how actually the new designs and the new type of technology, the technologies can influence the architecture and how we perceive buildings, how we perceive neighborhoods, how we perceive cities, and all of these environments, basically, that architects are thinking about.
I mean, I don't know where to start because there's so much. And indeed, because there's so much to talk about, because of a lot of disruption and transformation in the built environment, we actually initiated a conference with Nick and IDSC, so in partnership with the School of Architecture, which is the annual Smart Cities Conference. So I'm taking here the opportunity to publicize it and tell you to join us on May 19th and 20th to hear more about this particular topic, because there's a lot. And of course, it's all revolving around smart cities and the huge impact that they may have on our lives. But for this discussion, let me actually bring to the table one example, which I think is interesting and is directly related to the discussion about big data and AI. I want to bring this example of actually one of the biggest developers in the country actually partnering with Amazon so as to create in the homes that they build a seamless connection to the Amazon platform and the supply chain, etc. So basically, think of the house with embedded technology, Alexa everywhere, but also other devices, that measure and datafy and collect information. The house becomes a point of sale, and this is consequently, actually, this is a new business model for developers, because now they can actually get a percentage, a small, very modest profit from the sales, but it is a different business model. So I want to also to imagine the consequence and the future of this trend, whereby actually it's not only Amazon, but the developers actually become very much invested in the business of data, because the whole house becomes an instrument for the collection and the aggregation of data. So just like now, Facebook provides a free platform for your online persona, and the profit comes from the monetization of the data. Again, the developers also provides a platform in your real life, material life, for the datafication of your life. And this is where the profit may come from, a total shift to a different kind of business model. So the consequences of this in terms of privacy, security, etc., are very challenging. But I just want to point with this example to the potential radical transformations we may see in the built environments and how we may actually occupy and inhabit our homes in the future.
Rudy, this is a great example. I mean, I would paraphrase your example and say that now that developers are becoming technology technology organization instead of the traditional developers of building, buildings with
They
walls.
may give you the house away.
Exactly, give you the house away, and this is the typical kind of. I'm going to go back to Matt because we've lost him initially, but also to conclude his thoughts. But also I want him to start actually into our next topic, and I want it actually to put this up front, right? So the past 2 years we're living under a COVID pandemic. And we should not, I don't think that any one of us can ignore this. The reason that we have this kind of, digital meeting is because of COVID. So I just wanted also Matt not only to finish his thoughts, but also start us to the next topic, is that how COVID has changed this because everything has become all more digital, right, in our life the past 2 years. So which means we have generated more data, certain things change. So what are actually some of the COVID effects, if you will, positives or negatives that you can see in this space?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so just to finish up the prior thought, and I got my computer just crashed for some unknown reason, but
technology.
Sorry about that, but which highlights some of the problems we have here. In terms of, I'd separate two things. I think I was talking before, there's sort of the digital software transformation enabled capabilities, and then there's sort of the AI machine learning kind of enabled capabilities. The digital things, there's not a part of our business that's not being transformed by that. And this is things like basically removing friction in our guest experiences, various kinds of automation. So for example, automating the check-in process, right? So there's, instead of all this process talking, there's a face recognition. You've already filled out on your app, which your information, your passport, your COVID vaccination document, all that stuff. So basically you just walk in almost, would normally take you an hour and a half. So these are the kind of things that really improve people's experience. And getting into your guest room with Face ID or with your phone and presetting all your settings for the windows and the shell, all this kind of stuff, which is nothing too novel. It's being done in various places. But I want to highlight about that, the real problem with that, or the real enabler, is not so much new technologies. They're technologies, I think, that have largely been around for a long time in different kind of point solutions. It's really about the connectivity, being able to put data from one point to another point, which then the integration of data, because they have different data schemas, different ways of using data, and then changing a business process to accommodate it. In this case, if it's with our guests on our ships, it's having them know things are done differently now, better, but differently. If it's within a business process within our company, within our operations, it's the people who are used to doing marketing a certain way or pricing in a certain way or supply chain management in a certain way, changing them to having them understand what that business process change. And those are the real, in my view, limiting steps for digital transformation and sort of AI transformation, not so much the technology, and that's, I think, one of the key learnings. The other thing is, if you look at how to get that done, one of the key things is not, people say we've got so much data, it's great, we've got petabytes, terabytes, whatever we've got. That's usually not how you generate value in these business contexts, or even in these customer service contexts. It's in making sure you get the data that you need, right? And that sounds obvious, right? But it's not what you do in companies. In companies, you're like, here's all the data. The data was collected. If it's business systems, it was collected originally for financial or compliance reasons. If it's machinery, it was connected for either for control. The sensors on most equipment were done for control or certain kind of diagnostics. It wasn't done for predictive analytics, but we just make do with it anyway. And that's kind of the wrong way to do it. It's different than, say, self-driving cars. Now, you could have said with the self-driving car, when you're trying to invent those, that, hey, there's tons of sensors on cars already. There's like hundreds of sensors, all kinds of data. There's data on the environment. Just use that data and make algorithms that can drive the car. And we'd still be at square one if that's what we did. They said, no, what data do we need? Let's put LiDAR on the cars. Let's put video cameras. Let's put radar. Let's gather the data we need. And then very rapidly, if you look at on a normal timescale of technology, advanced technology development, they built the AI systems needed to do self-driving cars fairly well, right? And there's still a way to go, but really well. If we did that in enterprise situations, and we do that to some extent on our ships for the guests, where you actually put in the sensors and the data capture methodologies based on the data, the modelers and the software engineers say they need, you would really accelerate this, right? But that's expensive, and it requires a multi-year commitment, which then requires multi-year planning and multi-year commitments of budgets and so forth. So I think those are some of the considerations, to getting to impact there. To go over, transition to the COVID question, it depends a lot on industry. I would venture if you're Netflix and Amazon probably, and maybe Uber Eats and so forth, those companies, from a business, COVID was a disaster for everybody, but from a business perspective, it was actually a boon to them. They got more data, better data, accelerated customer adoption, right? Because you had to use them. But for the vast majority of companies in the world, and certainly cruise, the industry that I'm in now, I think I would argue even more so than most, our business depressed to almost zero. We stopped sailing completely. And so to the point that Arthur was making before, we don't have any data now to train. We don't have last year's data to base anything on. And even data from prior to the pandemic is less relevant because this emergence period now is very different than any steady state we had before. So we really have to learn how to get by without much data. And I think one of the ways you do that is, you have to bring in more domain knowledge. So you have to work with experts, try to codify, just like, for example, if you wanted to determine that something was a sinusoidal function from the data, you'd need data over a lot of periods to determine that. But if some scientist had told you they expected it to be oscillatory, et cetera, you would be able to fit that sinusoid with just a few data points. So likewise, if we have an idea of how things are behaving from the domain experts, you constrain the solution, you can get to a reasonable predictive model or reasonable model of some kind with less data. So integration of domain knowledge with the less data is a helpful thing. Using more external data and other relevant data. So for example, in our case, with cruise, we were hit, I think, one of the hardest. You kind of expect, well, airlines will probably recover a little earlier than we do, and maybe hotels will. So there's probably, we can borrow data from those industries and start looking at those as, some kind of leading indicators. So we do that. The other thing it really forced us to do is look at how we get more data from the current environment. So we started saying, instead of saying we're going to model this ship based on the behavior of this ship, whether it's operational or whether it's based on sales and the bookings and so forth, let's look at related ships. Let's see if we can find information from other cruise lines and so forth to augment the data. Now it's less relevant because it's not the same ship, but we're willing to pay that price because it gives us more data. So looking for related data and being a little less particular about the data you have is kind of important there. And lastly, I think, and this relates more to a business process from it, is sort of scenario planning analysis and planning with greater uncertainty. How do you do set pricing and bookings and inventory management when you don't really know what's going to happen in the future? Now we feel pretty good now because even with Omicron and other things, that they're causing a bit of a dip, but no one's expecting the kind of crash we saw in March of 2020. Almost no matter what happens. Back at that time, and go a few months after that, we're thinking we were going to get back to business. A lot of people did. We kept thinking there were so many predictions of when we'd get back. So you plan it and it doesn't happen. We still know now, because of what can happen, regarding fluctuation in the pandemic, our demand predictions of the future have vastly more uncertainty than they did in normal times, right? So how do you plan and make relatively justified and intelligent business decisions in the face of that uncertainty? So we've gotten a lot better at kind of a scenario kind of planning and how to do planning with wildly different potential futures.
Great, thank you, Matt. So let's actually open it up a little bit and go to Margaret again and talk a little bit about, Margaret, about how the county operations, in terms of the digital aspects have been changed because of COVID. To what extent and how you are adapting to that?
Sure. Well, unlike Matthew and the cruise line industry, the government never stopped working. And, for us, it was a matter of...
I didn't say we stopped working. We just weren't making
not
money.
stop working. Stop sailing. Let's just say stop sailing. We all miss those cruise ships. As you can see, that is my backdrop. But I can tell you, from a government perspective, we just had to pivot. And the good thing for us that we had a number of our technology folks already in that mindset of working remotely. But when you have 30,000 employees that need to move to that model, we had to quickly create what we call business in a box. What does it take for you to operate at home? Employees who were maybe using a laptop that they shared with a kid could no longer do that because their child needed it for school. So we had to start really looking at creating this model that would allow our employees to continue to be productive working remotely. And I can say, when I look at my staff, we have almost 900 folks in our IT department. The productivity level has been absolutely better. I mean, I think people are working longer hours. They don't have to drive, 1 and 2 hours in traffic. And they are available. We do a lot of work on Teams. And I think the technologies that we had to adopt during this period, under normal circumstances, it may have taken us a few years to get everyone on board, but necessity is the mother of invention. We needed it to work. both at the executive level, at the legislative level, and operationally. And so we adopted to these tools that allowed us to be connected, to share information, to collaborate. And it has now just become a part of our core operations. You know, the goal here is let's learn from what we actually did. Let's look at the tool sets that we adopted. You know, nobody needed to go to an office today to sign documents. They're all electronically signed. I guaranteed you, if I tried to push that policy, it may have taken a bit longer. So today, everyone expects that to happen. So now we're dealing with constituents and our employees. Our employees have adjusted to a new way of operating, which they find to be quite effective. We're starting to look at what hybrid work will look like in the future for the next normal, is what we're calling that. And our citizens, you know, their experience has also been different. And so they are wanting government services to meet them where they are with the services that they want. So now we're trying to look at that 360 customer experience. Who are you? What services do you get today? What services can we support your family with? So not just looking at the individual, but looking at the individual in a more holistic manner that says, if you're a household with seniors, with kids, you know, do we have after school programs in our parks that could support a family? Does your elderly folks need Meals on Wheels? You know, what are the things from a county perspective that we can provide a holistic solution to a person who is a citizen getting county services? So again, just really looking at how we have pivoted, the value of that, what we have learned, and how we can leverage that going forward.
Great. Let's go a little bit, I think, let's go to Diego now and to basically get, Diego, think how your industry has been, you know, how can I say, affected by COVID, and in what sense?
Yeah, more than happy to share my personal opinion on that. And I think it's not lost on us that the 2020 was a horrible year for humanity. However, in many ways, COVID was a catalyst for many, the adoption of many technologies and the cultural change of many technologies that little by little are building what many people at the end of the day are speaking about, which is the metaverse. And nowadays everyone speaks about that, but in reality is that you know, that grand view is a culmination of not only the flawless integration of components of technology coming together into ecosystems and platforms, it is also a cultural adoption of these modalities to interact with. And I think COVID had made a very real, very palpable to humanity that we can in fact work virtually. At the beginning, it may be, and depending the industries, as Matt was saying, it'll take different cycles to adjust to that and to adapt to that. But I think that modality we've hit a point of no return. One positive thing, because I think we're all aware of the negatives, but I think one positive thing I have witnessed, certainly in our industry, but more importantly here in the local ecosystem, is now you have the opportunity to have virtual companies with virtual intellectual capital that is allocated all over the world. I think here in South Florida, we have the opportunity for big tech entrepreneurs and people from all sorts of coming from all sorts of industries, coming and making Florida their home. And that's largely a function, that's in part, but it's a large catalyst, the adoption of virtual work. And one last point I'll make, I think from an enterprise perspective and a workforce perspective, it also allows us to not only for Florida to bring people in, as everyone's aware in 2021, it's also for Florida to go global and go virtually. I have had, I'll give you a perfect example of this. I would argue I've seen it not only in my space, but also in a Magic Leap. We've been able to tap the best talent we've ever been able to tap by virtue of having a virtual modality in our integrated teams. So we're able to hire people that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do it before. And I think that's largely cultural. That cultural acceptance drives policies and drives HR adoption, right? I hope that makes sense, but I think those are all good, positive catalysts that are driving our economy forward and will continue to be dynamics that we will have to solve for and hopefully remain on top of them to create a successful reality for Florida and the rest of our institutions here.
Great.
I hope I answer your question.
Yes, thank you, Diego. I think that, and also you brought something else. And again, I'm trying to give the panelists not to answer all the questions necessarily, but because I think that we have actually a pretty broad panel here. But you brought something else, which is about the workforce. And then in this era, actually, is that what is the workforce requirements, do you think? So do we meet those requirements in general? How we can re-educate our workforce? And what is the role that one would expect from, academic institutions like University of Miami and other institutions on our space? So, how you are viewing actually the workforce development, if you will, both the retraining of the current workforce, but also, what the expectations are for the new employees. And perhaps I can ask Joel to start us with this kind of discussion.
Well, for us is changing our approach, and it's something that we've started to do. The old model called for training police officers and whatever it was that you were going to deploy them to. So if the police officer was going to work in an investigative field, you sent them to investigation schools and they would go in that. If they were going to become crime scene analysts, then you send them to schools to learn how to take photographs and deals with those. But those are skills that are easily learned. When it comes to big data, we've realized that some people have the background, but we're not necessarily looking for those people when we're looking to hire a police officer. So we're changing our paradigm and we're realizing that we have to become competitive, and there is a limited pool of qualified employees or potential employees. Your University of Miami, Florida International is not graduating, I don't think, enough students to fulfill the void that currently exists. So now as new avenues and new job markets open up in different fields, right, it's going to become either the university is going to have to figure out a way to educate people in narrower fields instead of an entire bachelor's and all computer engineering, maybe narrow it down to certain fields. And us as a police department and as a government, we're going to have to become more competitive in the job market in order to draw some of this talent to change the workforce. So it's definitely an interesting time to be around.
Great, thank you, Joel. And actually, I will go to Arthur and actually ask him the same kind of type of question with his broad and vast experience that he's had. So what do you think the workforce question is, right? So what we need to do a little bit more in academic institutions, what the industry needs to do a little bit more. We're supposed to be, let us, about some of your thoughts on this topic.
I would recommend one thing, different thing. The classical thing, educate data scientists with the corresponding degrees, the academia is doing very well. What industry needs now is a mass scale education of people called the citizen data scientists with short type of courses. What exactly the previous guy mentioned. For example, in my key client, they had about 30, 40 data scientists, but they need 500 citizen data scientists. These are weekly short courses, for example, on AI, basics on data science. And another thing, let's the university go to the business, not the vice versa for these courses. Let's have some preparation to do these courses either on site or now with the virtual option, we can do it all the time. Let's use this unique experience we accumulated from the COVID, especially in the educational part, to accelerate the education. But that's what industry needs now.
Right.
A mass scale education on the basics of data science, AI, big data. This could be in, I have a course already, and some of your colleagues know about this course. So, and I have tested this course, it works. So you can do it in no more than 30 lectures, maybe in 12.
Right. So basically you are saying that you have to have this kind of basic education for everybody in the companies, for everything that they are doing, no matter whether they are the specialist or...
With one little detail. What industry needs mostly now is visionary managers, because that's the bottleneck now. Managers who are afraid to make decisions, but who have the power. We need to educate them why they need to invest in this technology.
Great.
And it could be in 4 hours, but very convenient. We have everything to do it, but we need to do it. I hope that the guys from the industry understand me very, very well, what I'm talking about.
Great. Thank you, Arthur. I think we're actually going to wrap up our program today, but I wanted to give actually Rudy the opportunity to discuss a little bit about how universities should be seeing this education in this, what one would call technofluency around data, big data, new transformational technologies. How you think that the universities, how you think need to be transforming themselves as well in order to address some of these challenges. Rudy, you are muted.
Yes, I'd love to answer this question, but also on a different occasion, I would like to speak also about how we are teaching differently because of the new technology and big data. And this has been all accelerated by the pandemic, actually, because we had to improvise, innovate immediately to accommodate to the new situation. But in terms of what the specifics of the question, yes, Joel and Arthur should be happy to hear that actually the university is exploring the things they're talking about, because it does recognize that given the speed at which the technology is developing, your traditional model of a long course of study culminating in a major degree, that's perhaps too slow to keep up with the change. So an open architecture curriculum where students can come in and out, they are already in the workforce, but they come to the university for short workshops, courses, micro-credentials. It's an idea of a kind of lifelong learning. Also, the idea of potentially a subscription model. So the students invest in not only in one degree, but actually in a lifetime subscription, which and that allows them to utilize the resources of the university throughout their career. So all of this is under consideration, and you will see more and more of it. Some of it has been already explored in pilot programs at the university, but we will see a major transformation in the way we deliver this kind of education and training because of exactly what you guys talked about.
This is great. And with that, I think that, we would like to conclude our panel. I think it has been a great discussion. I wish that we had a couple of more hours actually to discuss this. This was a very lovely, lively, I should say, conversation, and very broad, and we did this on purpose. But I would like to thank our panelists. For this, very, very, insightful conversation, and we wish to see them back, for our next conference, or perhaps for our other events that we're organizing. Thank you all again, and thank you for the audience for being here. I'm sorry we cannot take any more questions. There is a number of different questions in the chat, but we cannot take any more because we have to wrap up our program. Thank you all again, and thank you, our panelists. Thank you.
I must add my thanks to the panelists. The last event of the day is actually a talk by Ashwin Kumar. We're going to change the sector. We've got so many sectors represented today. We're going to go to the health sector now. Ashwin is actually the associate vice president of revenue cycle management and decision support systems at Jackson Memorial. And he has been, a great advocate of the use of data and AI to actually make decisions and profits. It's a very tough place to make profits, healthcare and hospitals. So he has been creating complex tech-enabled solutions to drive process improvement, revenue cycle in all areas of revenue cycle. He's used in health information management systems, patient access systems, clinical documentation improvements. And he's used all these techniques which we talked about this afternoon: machine learning, AI. So without taking away more of your time, I'm going to let Ashwin come in and take the floor. Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I've been following all the presentations from 2 o'clock. Super interesting. And this is what makes it really exciting. I think Joel said it, right? It's an interesting times to be in. Having heard all the points, I'm trying to pull my screen up here. We'll talk a little bit about what exactly we're doing, right? We talk about digitization. We talk about data-rich, information poor. We talk about petabytes of data. But I know, instead of, theorizing most of it about 4 or 5 years back, I said, we got to start doing something with this. So fast forward, what you see on your screen is a new department which we started in the Jackson Health System. We call it DROITS, Department of Research, Opportunity, Innovation, and Data Sciences. So as a part of this, I will also talk about our program called ANOVA, which we are creating. So again, right, healthcare, I think everybody knows, every political cycle at least, we hear so much commentary around healthcare. Unfortunately, most of the commentary which comes around is true. However you slice and dice this, our public spending on healthcare is almost 1/5 of the economy of our GDP today. I think after defense spending, healthcare spending is the second biggest, and it continues to grow. While, right, spending is not bad, spending is okay. But the second segment there, typically you would expect outcomes to be better, and they're not. When you compare ourselves to the other developed countries, we fall way below, even the middle of the pack in most key indicators. Some of them are there, right? Life expectancy at birth, infant mortality, et cetera, et cetera. On the right-hand side, again, right, when you look at it from a per capita spending perspective, we are 2 times more than the average of all the other developed countries. We spend almost $10,000+ dollars per person on healthcare. And the other big piece there is, right, 30% of our spending is typically deemed to be unnecessary or ineffective. And that number is huge, $765 billion. Now, what has happened in the healthcare industry? In at least, I would say I've been in the industry for about 21, 22 years now. In the last 12, 14 years, there is a lot of digitization which has happened, especially on the medical record side. Imagine, right, there was a time where these massive libraries of paper with paper charts for all patients used to be housed. Now all of that has become electronic, or I wouldn't say all of it, but most of it has become electronic. We call it EMR, right? Electronic medical record. And right, with all this new technologies emerging and the ability to do more, right, leading us into a data economy as well. So we want to treat innovation as a strategic asset, and we want to figure out ways of quantifying, digitizing the different events which are involved in the entire continuum of care for a patient. So again, right, that's the overall national, global kind of perspective. Now, if I zoom it down a little bit to Dade County, I mean, I heard Margaret speak. I'm sure you're very well aware of all these statistics. I believe most of us live here, so nothing is new here, right? It's a very challenging county in itself, with some of the stats, pretty much all of the stats, either way higher than the Florida average, or in a lot of cases, way higher than the national averages as well. I'm not trying to, show all the doom and gloom, but this is, again, right, this is reality. These numbers are prior to COVID, so I don't know how much distortion has happened to these numbers because of COVID. We're a very tourism-heavy county, with tourism taking a big hit. I'm sure some of these numbers have changed pretty dramatically. Then going into who we are, right, as a health system, Jackson Health System. We're a complex health system. These are all the aspects which make any health system complex, and we pretty much check off all the boxes which a complex system should check off. We're a level 1 trauma center, one of the busiest in the country. We actually, that bullet point needs to change. We're number 1 in transplants on the kidney side. I think we're number 2 on liver transplants. These are extremely complex, extremely expensive surgeries, which are performed day in and day out. We're obviously a not-for-profit safety net county hospital, so we treat everybody who walks in the doors. Jackson provides a huge amount of charity care every year, and it continues to grow every year as well. So that's who we are. Now, so right, when you take all these internal and external circumstances, and when you look at the overall digitization by industry, I remember McKinsey did this study a few years back. They did a chart of digitization by industry. Clearly, telecom, these guys were on top of the list. Banking, telecom, real estate, these guys were top of the list. Healthcare was, I think, second or third from the bottom. Again, the reason is, now with digitization of electronic medical records, we do have a lot of data. We can call ourselves digitized, but what are we doing with that data? So, with that kind of prospect in mind, I said we're going to create a NOVA as a program, and it sits under this department, droids. Too many acronyms here. So NOVA stands for Accelerated Neural Network for Opportunity and Variance Analysis. As Professor Johnson introduced, my goal has always been at least 6x returns on what we do, because there's so much upside and so much opportunity in everything which we do. Upside, the way I look at it in 2 ways. One is on the revenue optimization side, and the cost cutting and expense reduction side. Again, on the right-hand side, you'll see, right, why do we need to have a very explicit innovation strategy? That's standard, right, pretty much across a lot of industries, including ours. We miss an explicit strategy. Innovation is kind of fragmented between IT, between decision support, between all these departments trying to do their own, piece. Dedicated resources are an important part, and we heard from the panelists. They talked about how important this, education levels are, with people having multiple degrees. Data science is becoming a part of, any computer-based courses. These are all very important, aspects to look forward to in the future. With blockchain, right? Somebody discussed blockchain. Very, very interesting concept, but how can we adopt that in healthcare? So these are all these amazing technologies out there, but it's not completely optimized or fully utilized at least in the healthcare industry. So we want to do that. And we obviously want to be prepared and resilient versus surprised and disrupted. COVID was, again, a classic example. People talked about all the transformation they did. I was in the middle of it. 65% of my staff, I was able to move them very, very quickly to completely remote. And as Margaret mentioned, right, we're seeing, in fact, an increase in productivity levels. We're seeing an increase in efficiencies. We are seeing a lot of improvement in employee satisfaction. So that's, if one thing we can say out of COVID, what came out good was this. I live in Broward County. My 2-hour each way commute was cut down. So I was, getting 4 hours back in a day. So I was able to spend more time with the family. In fact, we're sitting more and working more also in front of the computer, but at least, right, the frustration of South Florida commute was at least taken out. So how do we achieve this, right? Moving from that hindsight to foresight, moving from that descriptive analytics to more predictive and prescriptive analytics. There are several approaches to this, and we put together several programs which have been extremely successful in the last 3 to 5 years. So obviously, this is not easy stuff. This is extremely complicated, especially when we talk about patient data, right? We're governed by heavy duty HIPAA laws. We have our own compliance and ethics and all these aspects we need to keep in mind very, very carefully when we do any of these analytics. So that aggregation of cross-functional skills, intellectual partnerships, and that's where, right, the concept of droids emerged this year. So now we have a dedicated department. We're quickly staffing that department up, coming up with the defining our ANOVA and what we call as a JHS standard model of care. We're trying to define all the feature listing and parameters to come up with that standard box. These are the 4 areas we're going to focus on, in a big way. On the left-hand top corner, you see patient experience. This is a big initiative which many progressive organizations have started about 4 or 5 years back, keeping the patient in mind, how they experience their entire continuum of care, physician conversations, the nursing conversations, how are medications described to patients, how are their bills, how do they look at bills? Is it how digitized and how clear their patient bills are? So all that, right, comprises and comes under the patient experience umbrella. Clinical outcomes, as you saw on the first chart, I showed you guys, right, some of the clinical outcomes at a national level are not good, and every hospital has that responsibility to have better clinical outcomes, lower mortality rates, lower length of stays, et cetera, et cetera. Operational excellence, obviously, right, that goes hand in hand with everything else. If you have good operational excellence, then obviously your patient experience and clinical outcomes will be better, leading into better financial results as well. So the core of all this is, right, we want to create these machine learning tools, machine learning predictive models, which will help us identify some of the negative outcomes in these 4 areas before they happen. So when we have the ability to predict a negative outcome way ahead on the continuum of care scale, we give ourselves an opportunity to fix that issue, or at least prevent that issue from happening again. We do have, right, again, tons and tons of data. Somebody was talking about petabytes of data. Yeah, we do have on the financial transaction side, we have more than 280 million records. On the patient encounter side, we have close to 10 million records. So we have tons and tons of data. So what is the ANOVA initiative? Right, again, in bold there, if we can characterize all the behaviors around care, and imagine the power of that data set. Today, just like some of the other industries, healthcare, the whole technology architecture in any healthcare system, as large as Jackson is extremely complex. We have a couple of big players who provide the EMR applications to hospitals in the country, and we use one of them. While delivering care is the most important aspect for those technology platforms, there's tons and tons of data which every day the systems create. Some of the modules, some of the systems in these aggregated EMR systems, while they all look very coordinated in the back end, right, the data can be coming from a lot of discrete systems. The way data is housed could have its own discretion as well. So somebody talked about having SMEs and subject matter experts. So gathering all that information, making sense out of it, knowing how to connect those dots, and then identifying the negative outcomes before they happen. So to build those predictive models, right, that will have a massive crystal ball effect in terms of opportunities. Now, right, again, we need to have very clearly defined paths of what we want to predict. So when I talk about financial outcomes, right, the payers are best friends across the table. They are in the business of finding ways of not paying for the services which we provide to our patients. Yeah, there could be self-inflicted items which we do to ourselves, making some errors. And then there could be this very advanced way of identifying some nitpick, some small thing, and then they can deny the entire payment to us. So those are called denials in our industry. So how do we predict a denial before it happens and prevent it from happening? So these are some of the models which we are trying to develop under the ANOVA umbrella. Again, I'm not going to get into all the details, but just to look at it, it's obviously an extremely complex system. We want to go after I got inspiration from standard model and particle physics. It's also called as the Lagrangian model. That's what the concept and the idea came from. And we said we need to mathematically integrate all these ideal encounters where everything went well into a standard box. And then on the other side, right, identify all the deviations from that standard. So there is, oversimplifying it, there is every feature which you're going to pick to develop this model is a study in itself. It will have a lot of clinical understanding which we need to gain, a lot of clinical ramifications if you predict something incorrectly, et cetera, et cetera. So the risk factors, the values which we're going to get, how do we write distortion effect equations for each one of them, requires a lot of math and statistics which we need to do apart from the core data science applications which we'll have to use. So that's in a nutshell, right, what ANOVA is. Again, some simple feature listing here on the 4 quadrants here, patient experience. There's something called as HCAP scores, which the industry has. It's a standard way of gauging the patient's experience when they go out of the hospital. Latencies in processing patients, right, moving from one department to another. When was the CT scan order placed versus when was it done? When was the lab order placed versus when did we get the results back from the lab orders, and so on and so forth. On the bottom left-hand corner, you see all these HACs, is what it's called, HACs, HAIs and PSIs. These are the incidents, unfortunate incidents which happen in hospitals all the time. HACs stand for hospital-acquired conditions, and HAIs are hospital-acquired infections. So yeah, there are a lot of things which can go wrong in the continuum of care of patients. So how do we identify those potentially in real time and prevent it from becoming a major disaster, and so on and so on, right? There are financial results. Without getting into each one of them, we have a cost accounting system. We pull information from there, look at the contribution margin at an encounter level to see, right, how we're doing from a cost perspective. Are we overutilizing anything? Classic example, that $765 billion of ineffective usage. There is a substantial portion in there where overutilization of services is a big problem in healthcare. We, especially as an academic medical center, right, we work with residents get trained at Jackson Health System. So we are a large academic medical center. So by nature of being an academic medical center, you would expect overutilization to happen, but not at the rate at which it should. So there are some ways of predicting overutilization before it happens, and it's going to have a massive effect on cost containment. So again, pharmacy is the same story. Imaging, very expensive service. Doing MRI, CT scans is not cheap. It's very, very expensive. How do we predict overutilization before it happens? Right. So those are some of the ideas and theories we're working on. Again, over the years, just giving you some tools, as Professor Johnson mentioned, there is millions of dollars which we have saved or added to our revenues by creating all these different list of tools. We call it quantum revenue cycle, M Sigma modeling, applied informatics management, and For CDI, we developed FRAP, HIM, we developed CHIME, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all, some of them are still in the works. For example, ATMAN, the denials prediction model, which I was talking about, that's we just launched it about 4 months back. So that's something which is in the works as well. So these are, just a quick glance at some of the things which you already developed. Right? What do we need? Right? Of course, this is essential. Utilizing some of the latest technologies out there for innovation is extremely essential. Again, this is not easy. It's going to be extremely complex data aggregation, but those are the 4 quadrants we want to go and hit. We obviously are looking for aggressive partnerships. Tomorrow we're talking to our CFO, and hopefully we partnered with MIT recently. We want to go talk to Google. We'll see how all these things will shape up, but there is a lot of initiatives which are already successful, and we're on the path to creating this standard model under ANOVA. So I know I kind of rattled it off very, very quickly. I'm going to stop sharing, and if there are any questions or any comments, I'll be happy to take them.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Ashwin, for that insight into how data and modern data analysis is being used by the healthcare sector, and the fine work you're doing there at Jackson. Any questions? We have time for a few questions. If not, I'm going to start off the questions, and then if you guys put it on the chat, I'll add on. So, Ashwin, our question, basically is from the things that we talked in the panel. And you never got a chance to talk about those questions. What are some of the challenges that you think that you face in your effort to, let me say, revolutionize or let's say bring data science and the modern techniques into the healthcare industry? What are some of the challenges that you face?
Understanding, right? This whole concept is so abstract for so many people that simplifying this thing and scaling it up. I wouldn't be here talking about this today if I started slow, started small, started delivering results, showing, hey, we created this. This is a simple predictive model. Look at when humans do it. It was presenting, right? I'm just talking about one model. It was humans were predicting something at a 74% accuracy. The first time I created it, it was already at a 48% accuracy level. Now put machine learning on it, and continuously, it's improving, and it's at about 64% accuracy now. So when we not only talk about some of these things, but actually put some small solutions out there, and know how to measure the value and present it to executive teams, right, who do not have to see all the guts and glory as to how something has been built. But when you show them that the needle has moved, and the needle has moved emphatically, irrefutably because of this, that slowly starts gaining a lot of buy-in. So anybody who's trying to do this, I would recommend them to start slow, start small, earn the credibility, prove it, especially in an industry which is not all that mature around utilization of data. Plus, it's highly regulated too. So that's the fear a lot of executives have. We can't give this data to anybody. I understand we can't give this, but there are other ways of providing data to folks as well.
Thanks, Ashwin. I have another question from one of our attendees, which is, how does ML or machine learning influence decisions not to do a test, example, an MRI, interface with standard of care? So if the machine says, no, don't do a test, how does it affect your decisions?
Right. I mean, it can be as simple as, I think probably labs would be an easier example to do. Most EMR systems do have some braking system built into the system to avoid overutilization. Simple case, you do a complete blood panel, right? You do a panel. There are 5 tests, let's assume, in that panel. You do it, you just did it 3 hours back, you've got the results in front of you, and then this new consult, all right? Let's say an attending physician is looking at the patient, but this consult comes in They don't even care to look at what has already been done. So they go and write another test from the same panel, which was done just 2-3 hours back. Nothing's going to change. So how do we stop that, right? That is overutilization. Today, if you don't have, and we're not going to intervene in patient care. We're not challenging the physicians here at all, because we can't risk lives, right? Let me make that very, very clear. But at least a tickler system where it says, hey, looks like this is being done. What you're ordering, the result is here. And the result of that was just like 2 hours back. Is there a specific need why you want to do this? And we should give them the option to bypass it, but at least pointing that out while the order is being placed is the best way to prevent overutilization. So if I'm able to take care of at least 5% of the physicians, right? They say, wow, I know this was done. I did not look at it here, so I'm going to rescind my order, right? That's going to be, we're talking about millions of dollars of savings when we do that.
Great. I have another tricky question for you, Ashwin. Okay, I'll give you the option of not answering it. But who was the executive sponsor for you initially? Was it the CIO, the CFO, the CMO, CMIO? Who backed you?
So no, I mean, it's not a tricky question. There's no secrets here. Our CFO, our executive vice president and CFO, oversees both my departments as well as IT. So whatever I do is in full partnership with IT. It's not going to work if you don't partner with IT. So our CIO is brilliant. He's an extremely progressive person. He's been with Jackson for many, many years. He's got a lot of institutional knowledge. So he and I work together. We come to a good agreement first, and then we present it to our CFO. From there, our CMOs, our chief medical officers, right, for the clinical aspects, I've always kept them informed with what we're doing, so that for the clinical pieces of information and advice which they need to give, they provide that advice to us. So it's a joint effort. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of things that actually work when you have the buy-in from different people. It's easy to convince everybody. Okay, I think we are getting to the time where we are going to close the conference. Usually we call you for wine and have a cheese and wine, but I can't do that today. I'm hoping that we'll do it next year. But I want to thank everybody who came and helped us today with this conference. This is a very important activity for us. I want to thank all our panelists, all our speakers, for taking the time and staying with us. I want to thank all the attendees for coming and joining us. I also want to thank all the people at IDSC who helped us put this together. I think Giannina, who actually worked very hard to put this together. Eva, Eve, who actually stepped in and helped us to actually make this a seamless experience. I want to thank Nick and Mitsu for always having the vision to keep this conference going and engaging the Miami-Dade businesses, the governments, and the other institutions like hospitals to be a part of our university. That's been a big dream of ours, and this goes in some sense in a way to fulfill that dream. So thank you, everybody. We have 3 minutes to spare, and so without taking very much of your evening, I want to say goodbye, and I'm going to see you next year. So bye.